Hey everybody, I wanted to give a brief introduction on how to use the Student Learning Objectives Worksheet real quick. And so first of all, we need to locate it. So open up your browser and go to www.onlinecogitation.com and then go and locate the tab that says for course designers, and then from there you're going to go to course designer packet and scroll down until you get to the Learning Objectives Worksheet. So just click on the picture there and it should pull up the worksheet just like you see it right here. Okay, so once you have the worksheet on your pulled up, you won't be able to edit it directly here because you don't have editing rights to the online version. So you want to just go to Files and then down to Download Document as a Word document. Once the document is fully downloaded, then just open it up. And there you have it, and you are ready to start creating your student learning objectives for your course. So in order to fill this out, you're going to want to have access to the Bloom's Taxonomy for Teachers. So go back to the Online Cogitation website and go to the Course Designers section again, and the Course Designers packet, and scroll down until you get to the one that looks like this right here, and you'll want to open that up, the Bloom's Taxonomy for Teachers, and then probably resize it. It may sized, this looks like it's sized correctly here, so I think if you just hit either Control plus or Command plus if you're on a Mac to make it bigger so that you can have access to this, and then you will be ready to use it as you fill out the form. Okay, now what are we looking at exactly here? As you can see across the top, we have Bloom's 6 different categories of learning, from knowledge to comprehension, then application, then analysis, synthesis, and then evaluation. So each one of these is a deeper form of learning. Knowledge is basically memory. Comprehension, you can actually explain something. Applications where they take the information that they've received and do something with it. Analysis is where they break something apart, explain the different parts of something. Synthesis is where they bring it all back together and create something new. And then evaluation is where they can actually justify their determination whether something is good or bad, or is quality or not so quality. And so all of these have a series of verbs underneath them as well that you can use in creating your student learning objectives. So for example, under knowledge, you have choose, copy, define, quote, read, etc. Under comprehension, you have ask, illustrate, indicate, give examples of, show the purpose of, etc. Under application, you have apply, associate, group, select, stimulate, solve, etc. Whole list of verbs there. And under analysis, another list of verbs. Under synthesis, another list of verbs. And under evaluation, another list of verbs. Remember, these verbs are extremely important because a student learning outcome is supposed to show what a student is able to do. And so to express something that you do, then you will obviously use a verb. So that's what this sheet is all about. Okay, so let's go back to the worksheet here. And as you will see, it has 4 columns. The first column is where we list the category from Bloom's Taxonomy that corresponds to that student learning objective. The second column, it talks about the conditions under which the students will perform this particular activity. So given a certain condition. The third column is the action that they will be able to do. And the fourth column is the criterion or standard by which they will be assessed. So for example, there's an example here given in the first row. Given a multifaceted problem solution case, that's the condition. The students are given a case study, and then the student will be able to identify the style used by the problem solvers. That's the action they'll be able to perform. And then the third column, or the fourth column, based on the problem solving strategies described in the textbook. That's the criterion by which they will be assessed. So let's think about the course that I'm building, which is a course in hermeneutics, and this is a course I've taught before, and I already have a system that I've used, and it's based on a three-step process of interpreting a passage of the scripture. The first is observation, and then interpretation, and finally application. And so I want them to be able to do that. Basically, that's the heart of this course. And so, first of all, I want to talk about the condition. Given a passage of Scripture, what will they be able to do given that passage of Scripture? The student will be able to complete the process of observation. Now, what is that process of observation? That's where the criterion comes in. The student will be able to complete the process of observation as described. Now let's put it a different way. As understood from a critical, from a socio-rhetorical perspective. Now, so you have here the condition that they're given a passage of Scripture. You have the action verb. They will be able to complete the process of observation, and then the criterion as understood from a socio-rhetorical perspective. Now, what is this? Obviously, that seems like a big technical term, and it is. Theologians and academics and scholars, they always want to come up with some big, long term. Basically, that's a process of Bible study that looks, first of all, at the text, and it has some certain steps and techniques that you can use to force yourself to really look at the text, and then you expand out from the relationship of that text with other texts, and then you go from there into other areas such as what does sociology tell us about this passage? What does history tell us about this passage? What can psychology tell us about this passage? And that's basically the socio-rhetorical perspective in a nutshell. And I will be teaching that perspective in the course, or that methodology. So as we look at this, where does this fit into Bloom's taxonomy? I would say that this is an example of analysis. Analysis. How do you spell that? There we go. And the reason for that is that they're going to be looking at a passage and breaking it down into the individual pieces, such as words that are repeated, contrasts that occur in the text, passages that have reference to other passages. They'll be looking at who is doing the speaking and when the dialogue changes from person to person. So these are all where they're taking a passage and they're breaking it down into its individual pieces, and that's the essence of analysis. So let's go to the next one. Again, given a passage of Scripture, the student will be able to complete, these are all going to be very similar, the process of interpretation. Interpretation as understood from a socio-rhetorical perspective. Again. And that goes a little bit beyond, that's different from analysis, because when I get to the stage of interpretation, they're actually pulling all these details together and trying to come up with generalizations about the passage, generalizations about the truth that they find in that passage, so that it can be, in other words, these are truths that are applicable in any society in any time. So we're really talking about eternal truths that we find in this passage. And that really is a process of synthesis. Okay, the next one is going to be similar again. Given a passage of Scripture, the student will be able to complete the process of application as understood from a again. And this, obviously, here we're talking about application, which, going back to the Bloom's taxonomy, you'll notice that is one of the categories. So, okay, but I want to say a couple. I want the students to come away from this with a couple of other areas as well. We're going to be talking about the history of biblical interpretation. So I want them when asked to give a summary of the history of interpretation. That's the condition. The student will be able to name the main schools of thought and explain how each one is different from the others. And then the criterion based on information they acquire from the course textbook. Of course, that's assuming that the course textbook has a fairly good chunk of or section dedicated to the history of biblical interpretation, which the textbook that I'm looking at does. And this really is, what kind of learning is this one? Basically, this one is comprehension. It goes beyond simply memory, which would be the first of Bloom's categories, because we're asking them not only to name or identify the names of these things, which they could memorize, but also to explain them, to contrast them with the others, and that's comprehension. And one final learning objective is when presented with various forms of figurative language used in the Bible, the student will be able to first of all name that form and explain how it is used, how it is used in biblical writing, for example. And this will be, again, based on information acquired in the textbook, because there's a large section on figurative language in the textbook, and on the lectures of the course. Okay, so in that one, again, is comprehension. And there you have it. I have, oh, and don't forget to delete this first row because that was just in there as an example. So we'll want to delete that first row. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 learning objectives for the course in biblical hermeneutics. By the way, I forgot to mention that here at the bottom of this sheet is another way to get to the Bloom's Taxonomy for Teachers. There is a link here that you can click and pull it up. So that's how to use that worksheet to create your student learning objectives. And here's my final list. And what's nice about this system is that you already have hinted at in the process. You already have hinted at how you're going to assess these things. So, for example, that's where the criteria section comes in. So when the student is given a passage of scripture and is asked to complete the process of observation, I will check their process over against the steps in the socio-rhetorical process, and to see how well it matches, and that will be a part of how I base my assessment. And then, for example, this number 4, actually, when they're asked to give a summary of the history of interpretation, I'm going to look in there to see if information that they give corresponds with the information in the textbook. And so all of these are also giving us hints at how to assess this capability. So thank you for watching.